you're desperate, you're trying everything. You know, which has been the case here. There are a lot more strictures now about your justification for trying something experimental. You know, that didn't exist in 1918. But we're still pretty desperate. We've tried a lot of things that haven't worked, but we've also improved care, because many of the things that we tried, including things as simple as, instead of putting somebody on a ventilator, laying them on their stomach, which has saved a lot of lives. Yeah, I mean, we have standards, and you have to have reviews and so forth before you try a really experimental theory. In 1918, in the cities hit hardest, where people were lied to the most, like Philadelphia, which I wrote about at considerable length. You know, things were pretty bad. I think society is based on trust. When you break that trust, then it's everybody for himself or herself, or your own family, and that's all you care about. You can't rely on anybody else. You don't care about anybody else. And in most disasters, people come together and you see the best of humanity. And there were certainly plenty of heroes in 1918, but you saw a lot more of the worst of humanity than you did the best. In Philadelphia, when they were calling for volunteers, they couldn't get anybody because there was so much fear. You know, Philadelphia was a place where, I say, talking about lies and saying there was fake news, but it was news that the government wanted to put out there. When they finally, belatedly, at a time when they were using steam shovels to dig mass graves, they finally closed schools and businesses. And one of the newspapers actually said, "This is not a public health measure. You have no cause for alarm." I mean, come on. So as a result, you had people who starved to death because they couldn't, the volunteer agencies couldn't find anybody to bring them food. And this same thing was occurring in rural areas too, not just a big city like Philadelphia. You know, I saw Red Cross reports that said the same thing in rural Kentucky, for example. So society began to fray. I think the most plausible hypothesis, and I think the one that's got the most support, is that, you know, your immune systems are different. It changes over time. It's strongest when you're younger, and the immune system tended to overreact, and that created the cytokine storm, which people are dying of now. The irony is, today, younger people tend to have immune systems that are strong enough to fight off the virus. Older people may get, as a general rule, sicker, or people with some comorbidity, but their weaker immune system, it's not strong enough to fight the virus off entirely, but it's strong enough to create this overreaction. You know, the immune system has a lot of very, very deadly weapons it can throw at you, or at you know, a pathogen in the body. And in 1918, the battlefield was the lung, and it was destroying the lung to you know, to try to beat the virus. You know, I think most people in 1918 probably died of bacterial pneumonia following influenza, but it was much the same process. In those cases, you know, the influenza just opened the way for bacteria. Even today, with the best antibiotics, bacterial pneumonia following influenza has an 8% case mortality rate. That's pretty high. And of course, in 1918, without antibiotics, it was 3 to 4 times that. But you know, those combinations of things, either directly from the virus in the cytokine storm, or the virus destroying your protections that would normally stop a bacterial pneumonia, those two things. Take the advice of public health advisors. Everybody get on one page. It's easier said than done. You still have some governors who are very reluctant to do anything. You know, he's no doubt he's already announced, you know, you make masks mandatory on federal property. He doesn't have the legal authority probably to do much more than that, but that is a bully pulpit. And you know, if you can get, I would assume he would bring some Republicans on stage with him. Even Mitch McConnell on masks probably agrees with Biden. I don't know that for an absolute fact, but McConnell certainly said he's for masks and so forth. So if you get some bipartisanship up there, that would help. We still have shortages of PPEs. Remarkable this far along that we still have shortages of PPEs. But he would use the Defense Production Act to move that along. He's already made clear he will do that. He's already made clear that he will create a commission on testing. The testing is very important to know where you are and know where the disease is going. The problem is when you're having 140,000 cases a day, as yesterday, and if it's going up, you know, you need to get the case count down significantly before you will be able to test and trace, isolate, quarantine, and so forth. You can't do it with tens of thousands of cases a day. You don't have the personnel and the infrastructure. But there will be a much more coordinated plan. There will be guidance to schools. Right now, it's almost every school board, and in some cases, every school for itself. It's got to make its own decisions without very clear guidance. That's laughable. You know, there will be much clearer guidance. Things will improve dramatically, but that doesn't mean that the case count is going to go down dramatically right away. Frankly, at this point, I trust the FDA. I would not, I might have had some questions with Trump exerting all that pressure, but Stephen Hahn, the director, did in the end stand up to it. He kind of bowed on hydroxychloroquine, but that drug has been in play for years for lupus and so forth. So it was a well-known quantity being put to a new use. It's a little bit different from a new drug. So yeah, I'd certainly be okay with that. I'd line up for a vaccine. Incidentally, the Russian vaccine, which didn't go through the testing that would be required in the United States, they approved a vaccine and they are claiming 92% effectiveness. I think there was a paper in the last few days. We still need to examine that data. But, you know, one of the things earlier when I was saying that the virus, the COVID doesn't mutate nearly as fast as influenza. The spike protein, which is the target of almost all the vaccines, you know, that seems pretty stable. Influenza, the antigens that the influenza vaccine aims at happens to be part of the virus that mutates very, very rapidly. That's why you don't get those kinds of effectiveness rates for an influenza vaccine. So, everybody's optimistic. There's still a lot of questions. Does that simply prevent, does the 90%, does that simply prevent mild disease? What does it do to severe disease? Does it really cut down on severe disease? We don't know yet.